Nobody expected it to come to this, but the tension has been building for months, and now it's official: the courtroom. Showdown between Justin Baldoni's legal team and Blake Lively's powerhouse attorneys is locked in for this month, and what's about to happen could change everything, because this isn't just a hearing. It's personal, it's tactical, and it's fueled by months of buried secrets, failed settlements, and a digital war that turned legal. And the moment those lawyers step into the same room, the truth won't just be argued, it'll be exposed live and unfiltered. Because this isn't just about who's right, it's about who has more to lose, and with both sides bringing new evidence and high-stakes witnesses, one wrong move could mean the end of a career or the fall of a carefully constructed empire. And the question on everyone's mind isn't what will happen in court, it's who will survive it. No one expected the courtroom showdown to actually happen. Not this soon, not this directly, but now the date was locked, the subpoenas had been answered, and the court had confirmed it. Justin Baldoni's legal team and Blake Lively's high-powered attorneys would go head-to-head in person in a hearing that insiders were calling the legal equivalent of a nuclear detonation, because this wasn't just discovery, this wasn't just preliminary argument. This was personal reputations, entire careers, and a digital creator movement riding on what would be revealed in that room, and the energy was palpable. Online creators whose channels had been throttled or flagged mysteriously now had subpoenas with their usernames on them, and whistleblowers were preparing to testify that they had helped bury or manipulate content at the request of unknown legal teams, one of which now bore a disturbing resemblance to Blake's own attorney roster. And while official press releases tried to minimize it, calling it a procedural session, the insiders knew better. This wasn't a formality. This was war. The night before the hearing, the courthouse was already surrounded, not by protesters, not by paparazzi, but by a strange silence like the air before a storm. Legal aides arrived early, scanning for security breaches, while camera crews staked out spots expecting fireworks. The judge had already issued an unusual order: no delays, no telepresence. This would be in person, and all arguments had to be supported by evidence or eyewitness. And Justin's team was ready. What they had wasn't just a rebuttal, they had a sequence of internal documents, messages, emails from PR firms, whistleblower testimony, and financial records that told one continuous story, and that story pointed fingers directly at a campaign of suppression, manipulation, and false narrative construction allegedly greenlit by figures connected to Blake Lively's team. And now it was all being dragged into the light. When the doors opened, the room filled fast. Justin Baldoni entered, calm, flanked by his lawyers, one of whom had previously helped expose coordinated misinformation networks in political trials across Europe. He wasn't just here for law, he was here for war. Blake Lively didn't appear, but her lawyers did, dressed immaculately with tablets glowing already mid-scroll, reviewing strategy with whispers, cold smiles, and confident posture. But under the surface, cracks were beginning to show. One of her attorneys had recently withdrawn, citing moral objections. Another had been seen entering the building from a back entrance, flanked by private security, and that didn't go unnoticed, not by the press, not by the court. The judge opened with a chilling statement: "We are not here for games, we are here for truth and justice, and any attempt to obfuscate will be dealt with accordingly." And that was the tone for the rest of the day. The first motion came from Baldoni's side. They asked to submit supplemental filings labeled Project Cascade and Wave Filter, and those two documents would change everything, because they outlined the skeleton of what was now known as the Influencer Deflection Protocol, a covert legal and PR mechanism designed to discredit creators who spoke out against powerful clients by initiating anonymous copyright strikes, triggering platform throttling, and flooding their channels with coordinated hate campaigns, disguised as organic backlash. And according to the documents, Blake's legal team had both access to and involvement in those tactics through third-party firms acting on their behalf. The defense objected immediately, citing lack of provenance, but Baldoni's lawyer stepped forward and produced a sworn affidavit from a former paralegal who had worked on the exact task force responsible for generating those strikes. And the affidavit included details, dates, screenshots, and a smoking gun, a recorded video call where strategy sessions were held with slides showing creator names alongside action plans. The room went dead silent, and the judge didn't blink. Instead, she said, "Motion to admit is granted." And so began the unraveling. As the court went deeper, each document bled into the next, tracing a web of influence suppression that spanned multiple platforms, PR companies, and legal intermediaries. And at the center consistently was a redacted name marked only by initials, BL, and dates that matched exactly with major events in the case. including when several creators had their channels unexpectedly demonetized. The eerie precision of the timeline was damning. One influencer's ban had followed just hours after they published a breakdown video on the Lively vs. Baldoni scandal, and now evidence suggested that strike had not only been predicted by the internal documents, it had been requested in writing by someone on the legal side. The defense tried to argue that none of this proved direct involvement by their client, but Baldoni's team came prepared. Next, they introduced an internal audit leaked from a now-defunct social listening firm showing that certain search terms related to Justin Baldoni had been algorithmically buried during peak moments in the case, and the firm had been retained, not by a random agency but by a shell company registered under the name of Blake Lively's talent management wing, and the invoices led directly to the same law firm, now defending her in court. At this point, murmurs swept through the gallery. Even the press looked stunned, and the judge gavelled the room back to order with a sharp reminder that this wasn't theater, it was testimony. But then it got worse. The prosecution introduced a private Slack conversation between mid-level firm executives referencing the quote Blake playbook and using phrases like suppression package and influencer neutralization, and when the court demanded clarification, they revealed the source was an anonymous whistleblower who had provided not just text but screen recordings, including time-stamped video evidence of those discussions taking place in real time, and included in the footage was a single damning phrase: "We can't let this hit her reputation, especially not now. Let's use the fallback strategy and push the backlash," and beside it a list of hashtags, written captions, and a set of influencer usernames tagged from mass flagging. The courtroom reacted with stunned silence, and for a moment even Blake's attorneys looked shaken. The judge requested a recess, but not before one final bombshell. The prosecution announced that a second wave of subpoenas had been issued, this time not to creators or firms, but to platform executives, because if these actions were approved internally, someone at the tech level had enabled it, and now that trail was being followed too. The game had changed. What started as a defamation case was now growing into potential conspiracy, obstruction, and digital manipulation, and the courtroom was only just beginning to understand how far the shadows stretched. As the courtroom resumed after the judge's short recess, the energy in the room was completely transformed. This wasn't just a case anymore, it was now a battleground of narratives, reputation warfare, coded suppression, and explosive evidence, and Justin Baldoni's legal team knew they had lit a fuse. What came next would either solidify their stance forever or collapse the entire framework around them, but they weren't stopping. The second half of the hearing began with the introduction of a witness, someone who had remained anonymous for over a year, a mid-level data security officer formerly employed by a contracted analytics firm operating under NDAs that had been signed on behalf of a publicist whose name was redacted, but the initials ARA kept reappearing. And while the courtroom was never allowed to say Ryan Reynolds directly, the implications were thunderous and undeniable. The witness was seated with voice distortion and a protective screen at the request of the court. Their statement was quiet, clinical, methodical, and absolutely devastating. They described being tasked to coordinate metadata scrubs and engagement suppression, not on behalf of a government agency or law enforcement, but for what was described internally as high-risk reputation clients, among them a high-profile couple tied to multiple media conglomerates and under legal scrutiny for creator-centric backlash. And in one file, the witness said they saw a keyword flagged repeatedly over a 3-month cycle. That keyword was Baldoni, paired with the terms liar, manipulative, YouTube creator, and smear reversal, and every time that phrase trended, the system would initiate a down-ranking protocol pushing related content out of discovery pages and home feeds. With what the witness called surgical efficiency, the courtroom froze again, and one of Blake's attorneys stood to object, citing lack of chain of custody. But Justin's team anticipated this. They produced the chain, the digital logs, authenticated and verified timestamps, server signatures, and platform tracebacks. They had worked with forensic analysts to reconstruct the exact windows of activity and even link the timing of the engagement drops with calendar entries from the PR firm show when Blake was scheduled for appearances, press drops, or legal submissions. The conclusion was chilling. The suppression wasn't random, it was tactical and deliberate, and it was centered on protecting Blake Lively's brand at the cost of creator credibility. But the revelations didn't stop there. Next, the court was shown an encrypted email chain between lawyers and a consultancy group that offered what they called rapid narrative control in public trials, and in the center of the thread was a shocking document titled Content Defamation De-Escalation Strategy, which outlined steps to manipulate public perception via planted commentary, bot amplification, anonymous video reports, and influence pooling using accounts believed to be authentic creators but actually managed internally and again in the metadata. Buried in the PDF properties was an author tag that matched a senior associate in Blake's law team, someone who was currently seated in the courtroom attempting not to show any reaction, and it worked until the prosecution read one final line from the file: if creators keep pushing escalate with platform flags, initiate legal notices, prepare fallback defense of malicious misinfo, and it was signed off with one chilling line: ensure B is not connected publicly. The judge looked up slowly and then said, "We will break for lunch, court will reconvene, and when we do, I expect this court to hear direct arguments from both legal teams," and the gallery buzzed with whispered chaos because even the most seasoned journalists had not expected it to go this deep, this fast. The hallway outside was swarmed within minutes, and social media exploded again with the hashtag Justice for Creators climbing trending lists in multiple countries, and the tech community began weighing in, because now it wasn't just a celebrity trial. This was beginning to look like digital warfare. Inside the room during the break, one of the paralegals near the defense table was seen texting rapidly before quickly leaving the room, and moments later a reporter posted that an anonymous tip had just revealed a previously sealed agreement between a large agency representing multiple A-list clients and a firm tied to several of the suppression techniques being exposed, and while names were redacted, the dates once again aligned with the height of the smear campaign against Justin Baldoni and the defamation counter push that had now become this trial's central firestorm. And still the defense maintained silence. Their strategy up to this point had been delay, deny, deflect, but that was crumbling minute by minute, and the pressure was rising. When the court resumed, the judge demanded arguments. The defense began with a formal objection to the witness protocols and claimed that digital evidence lacked direct connection to their client, but Baldoni's lawyer countered with perhaps the most shocking moment of the day. They stated on record that a new witness was prepared to step forward, one who had remained hidden due to fear of retaliation, but had now agreed to testify not just about what they saw but who gave the orders. And the court gasped when the lawyer added, "This witness worked inside the entertainment legal industry at the time and has direct knowledge of conversations in which content suppression and creator targeting were authorized, specifically to protect the public image of Blake Lively." You could hear a pin drop, and the judge's face changed visibly from cautious curiosity to intense scrutiny, and suddenly the room felt tighter, heavier, because now it was real. There was someone out there ready to speak, and the implications weren't just career-ending, they could be criminal. The defense asked for time to review and respond, but the judge refused, saying delays had already cost this court enough time and justice must move forward. And so it was decided that in the next session, the mystery witness would appear under seal, and the judge would determine whether a grand jury recommendation would be necessary based on what was revealed. As the hearing ended for the day, reporters swarmed both sides, but Justin's team gave no comments, walking silently through the crowd, while Blake's attorneys left through the basement garage, refusing to acknowledge questions. And one photo leaked by an anonymous employee showed one of the lead attorneys with his head in his hands alone in a hallway, a moment that quickly went viral as the face of a crumbling defense. And online, the public mood shifted rapidly as creators began sharing their own stories of sudden strikes, weird algorithm crashes, and sudden bans that all seemed to align with the patterns now being exposed. In court, the entire case had taken on a life of its own, and as the night fell, the phrase, "It's not just about Justin anymore," began trending because people realized this hearing was opening a door not just into Blake Lively's potential misconduct, but into a much wider, darker world of digital silencing, influence peddling, and coordinated narrative control. And now there was no turning back. The subpoenas were out, the witnesses were talking, and the court had shown it was ready to go all the way. The face-off had begun, and the truth was no longer buried, it was fighting to be heard, and soon everyone would know just how deep this rabbit hole went. The next morning, the courthouse was surrounded before sunrise, the air electric with tension. Reporters, creators, influencers, legal analysts, and even silent brand reps hovered near the marble steps, waiting not just for entry but for history, because today, the mystery witness would appear, and this wasn't just about a defamation trial anymore. This is about the future of how public narratives are shaped, who controls them, and who gets crushed beneath them. Inside the courtroom, the crowd held its breath as the doors opened, and in walked the witness, a figure in dark gray wearing a face Shield flanked by 2 marshals and escorted directly to the stand. The court allowed distortion for voice and anonymity of name for safety reasons, but that didn't stop the damage that came next from landing. Like a bomb, the witness began by stating, "They were formerly employed as a communication strategist for a firm contracted by entertainment law groups, and they quickly clarified that the contracts in question specifically included crisis management for high-risk public figures, including, but not limited to A-list actors, major streamers, and media personalities, and that, within that role they were instructed to build digital campaigns disguised as organic online support or outrage, depending on the desired outcome they described. A system in which creators were monitored and tagged based on threat levels and engagement impact, and that if a creator was seen to be gaining traction, especially with videos critical of certain clients, that creator would be entered into what they called the obstruction funnel, which included downranking, shadow engagement, throttling, and if needed, flag escalation through partnered moderation vendors." And the courtroom froze as the judge leaned forward and asked plainly, "Did any of this relate to Justin Baldoni?" And without hesitation, the witness responded, "Yes, I was assigned to the case file labeled BLVSJB, which stood for Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni, and the first command directive I received was make it go away, the silence that followed could have shattered glass." And when the judge asked who gave that directive, the witness handed over a secure drive and stated, "The chain of command was traceable from email to invoice, and that names would be visible in metadata and cross-confirmations, and again the initials RR surfaced in subject lines and author fields, along with references to legal teams currently seated in the room." And it was at that moment that Justin Baldoni's legal team stood and submitted a motion to unseal a second document, one that had previously been protected by privilege, but now under the court's order could be introduced as part of evidence. The document was a billing statement dated during the height of the creator backlash. It included charges for influence mitigation, brand protection, amplification reversion, and one cryptic entry, labeled platform dampening protocol, and the payment was traced back to a fund managed jointly between 2 publicists and a law firm, both of whom had direct ties to Blake and Ryan. And as the judge reviewed the material, her expression shifted from inquisitive to sharp. Her voice clear and cold, she said, "This court must consider whether an attempt was made to weaponize legal counsel, to manipulate public discourse, and if proven, that would elevate this trial beyond defamation into obstruction territory." In the moment she said it, the gallery erupted. The court had to bang the gavel 6 times to restore order, because that statement wasn't just legalese, it was the first official acknowledgement that what had begun as a dispute might now qualify as criminal intent. Blake's legal team moved quickly to suppress the motion, claiming attorney-client protection, but Justin's attorneys countered with a devastating revelation. They had obtained records from a consulting firm employee showing that a third party had been given access to the very same suppression strategy guides via a back-channel leak, meaning that once the documents left the law firm and were shared for operational use, the privilege no longer applied, and the court agreed, overruling the objection and allowing the files to be submitted and reviewed in full. And with that, the door was thrown open for the witness to continue revealing a system so organized, so deliberate, that even the most seasoned PR experts watching online were shaken. The witness described meetings conducted via encrypted chat platforms, code names used for each target, creator and reputation score ratings that determined the level of suppression they would endure. Creators were ranked from green to red, and Justin Baldoni's name had been labeled black, meaning full suppression required. And when the court, and just like that, what started as a celebrity defamation case exploded into something much bigger, a full-blown expose of an entire machine built to silence, suppress, and manipulate. Justin Baldoni didn't just defend himself, he became the voice of every couture whistleblower and every person who was ever buried by power and influence. He tore the curtain down and showed the world what was really happening behind closed doors. This was no longer about fame, it was about justice. And as the courtroom prepares for its final showdown, one thing is certain: the truth is no longer whispered. It's roaring.